Sometimes contending for the faith is nothing more than standing next to and being faithful and a faithful friend to others who are standing and contending for the faith. Let's look at a man who did just that in today's episode of the Contend podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Contend podcast. Today we're looking at someone from the Bible who was a friend to the Apostle Paul. And as I said in the intro, sometimes contending for the faith is just standing with and being a friend to others who are contending for the faith. So we're going to look at a couple verses from the book of 2 Timothy. I'm going to read them, and the scriptures, as always, are linked in the description of this video if you want to look them up or follow along. But we're going to read 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 10 and 11. Really just the first part of verse number 11, but it says, For Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed to Thessalonica, Crescens to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. We see that first part of verse number 11 there. Only Luke is with me. Today we're looking at the character of Luke, and someone who we know from even back from the Gospels, the writer of the third Gospel, the physician Luke, and we see him someone who joined up with the Apostle Paul and Silas in their missionary journeys, and in the book of Acts we can read how he was with them, and a little nugget, something for you to think about. In the book of Acts, Luke was the writer of the book of Acts. So when it says we, that means that was when he was with Paul and Silas. And when he just refers to them, that means one of the journeys he wasn't with them on. So just something to keep in mind, something to think about when you're reading through the book of Acts. But I'm afraid that there are too many Christians and too many contenders who really on their own are good contenders, but they're unwilling to just stand by other contenders for the faith. They say, well, I don't like him because fill in the blank. He does something that I don't like. And I'm not talking at all about doctrinal things. Obviously, we need to be point for point with doctrine when it comes to doctrine with our friends. We need to be definitely lining up with doctrinal things. But just because someone does something different than us, just because to make it comparable to now, just because someone does a live stream service and another person does a pre-recorded service, that shouldn't be a reason for you to separate friendship or not stand or speak up against that brother. We need to be definitely people who are standing with others. This world is obviously dying for a lack of churches, a lack of good Christians, a lack of good witnesses, and many times Christians fall away from their service, or they just are unwilling to press on because there's no one standing with them. There's no one willing to just come beside them and say, hey brother, I'm praying for you, or hey sister, we can get through this. It's something that we can do together. It's something that we can press forward and contend together in this same at this same time. So we need to make sure that we as Christians are willing to stand alongside and stand with those other contenders for the faith, just as Luke did with the Apostle Paul, someone who was with him in the book of 1 Corinthians. Paul talks about how there were those that refreshed him, and many times contending is just that. Many times we don't get to have the limelight. We don't get to be in the spotlight. You remember we talked about Andrew, someone who served in the shadow of his brother Peter, and we need to be willing to serve and stand alongside these other fellows or ladies who are contending for the faith and be a friend to them. So let me encourage you as you contend for the faith, as you strive to press forward for God and to do things to contend for the faith. Make sure you're standing alongside those who are also contending for the faith. Don't be someone who's like, oh, I can't be friends with them, or I don't want to stand with them because they'll make me look bad. Maybe they're contending better than you are. Make sure that you're there lifting them up so that you two can kind of mutually benefit from each other as friends. So make sure that you're someone, I challenge you, make sure you're someone who's being a friend as we contend for the faith. I hope you'll stay tuned for just a moment for the Contend wrap-up. We're going to be looking at something a little different than our normal wrap-up, but you won't want to miss it. It's a little resource, something for you to think about. So stay tuned for the Contend wrap-up. This past weekend, we just celebrated Easter, Easter Sunday, celebrating the resurrection of Christ. And there's this resource from Answers in Genesis. It's called the 7 C's of History. There's also a postcard, little version you can just put up there. But this is an awesome little booklet. And I just want to take a second and talk about this because as important as it is to remember creation, corruption, this is the 7 C's, obviously, and the catastrophe of the flood, the confusion of the Tower of Babel, and then what followed after that, we do come to the C that represents Christ, and then also the cross, or the next two that they have listed there, and we know of all the historical facts, most of them taking place all the way back in the book of Genesis with the creation, and then Adam and Eve and the fall, and all the different things that took place. But all of that led up to Christ being born and then dying on the cross for us and then rising from the dead. The reason that is because of all those things before. He had to die. He had to be born and live a perfect life and then die on the cross for us so that we can, and then raise again so that we can have new life through him because of what's coming in the future. The last C that is on in their little plan is consummation, talking about the end of the earth, and we need to make sure that we have trusted Christ as Savior, that we have put our faith and trust in him, because the only way that we're going to be able to contend for the faith is if we truly have that faith in him. So check out this resource. I'll have it linked in the description. And remember that because of all the things that Christ has done for us, we need to contend for him, but we must first make him our Savior so that we can contend for the faith. Hey guys, let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and share it on your social media or however you share things. But and go ahead and take a second, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. We have some big things coming for Contend in the next couple weeks. You won't want to miss them, so turn on the notification bell so you can get notified when we post a new video. And I hope that you guys will tune into those. And remember, don't be a pretender, be a contender.